Welcome back to another Bali COVID-19 update, and this is November 10th, 2021, and Selamat Hari Raya Galungan dan Kuningan for all of you who are celebrating Galungan and Kuningan for these next 10 days. A lot here today, and as usual I've cut out a bunch of stuff, some of which I can carry over to Sunday, and some of which, well, it's just let it go. No big news on quarantine, although there is a clarification, and I'm going to talk about that in just a minute. And the numbers are looking good, continuing to look good. But first, let's start out with the quarantine clarification. And just an update on quarantine implementation from the Jakarta Quarantine Hotel website. Every international arrival starting on November 2nd is required to present a vaccine certificate, full doses, except for Johnson & Johnson and CanSino, and a negative COVID-19 PCR test result prior to entering Indonesia. There is a mandatory 2 nights and 3 days, not 3 nights and 4 days, as some people thought. A 2 nights and 3 days quarantine at the designated accommodations, and the requirement must be followed by a second PCR test on the 3rd day at the designated accommodation between 4 a.m. and 5 a.m. Wow, okay, early. Otherwise, departure will be delayed on that day. So you can get your test early in the morning and you can leave later? Okay, cool. The implementation of the quarantine protocol and the first PCR test is carried out at the airport after landing and continues with the PCR test at the designated quarantine location chosen. The implementation is supervised by handling officers from the Ministry of Health and COVID-19 Handling Acceleration Force Team. Once the first PCR test has been conducted with negative results, the arriving passenger will be sent to the quarantine hotel. Once the designated quarantine accommodation has been arranged, it's not possible to move to another venue. So you need to book in advance and you can't leave. You can't go to another place. So once you get there, you're stuck if you don't like it. So if you want to find out good places to go, use social media to find out. And I will put a link to the Jakarta quarantine website, hotel quarantine website down below here. And you can check on that there and find out places and prices. Okay, let's get to the numbers. And the numbers are looking good. 7-day average for new positive cases has dropped to 10. Yes, 10. And yesterday we had 8. Today the numbers went up a little. 7-day average for deaths remains at 1, 17th day in a row. And the numbers around Indonesia, 434 new positive cases and 21 deaths. What about testing in Indonesia? 173,067 tests yesterday and 0.25% positive. The 7-day average positivity rate is 0.31. What about testing in Bali? Over the past 7 days, 38,544 individuals were tested with a 7-day positivity rate of 0.27%. And vaccination numbers, because as you're going to hear later on, vaccination numbers are important, and one epidemiologist said we should be looking at that. First dose, 3,428,327, 76.8% of the population, and that is based on the big numbers, not the target group, the total population. So we are well over 70%. Second dose, 2,972,932, 66.6% of the population, and that's going slowly with the second dose. Yesterday, 3,106 additional doses were administered. And we're not likely to see these numbers increase significantly until we start to vaccinate children, because we have a large group of children in Bali and in Indonesia. And once they start to get vaccinated, and that's going to be a segment coming up soon, once they start to be vaccinated, those numbers are going to go up again. And the Bali numbers, new positive cases yesterday, 21, so 11 above the average. Recoveries, 10. Deaths, 1. And active cases in Bali, 237. Okay, so the numbers are looking good. But you have to remember, we have Galungan and Kuningan right now. We have Christmas and New Year's coming up, so there's going to be a lot of movement going on. And how is that going to affect us? Too early to tell. So with the numbers looking good, There continue to be warnings, as I mentioned in the last video, continue to be warnings to be careful that we're looking at another surge coming up. Nobody knows exactly when, but people are pointing at the holiday season. Well, here's something. New COVID-19 clusters emerging in Yogyakarta. Sultan alerts elderly. So the Sultan of Yogyakarta has alerted senior citizens, people above age 50, wow, I'm really a senior citizen then, to be on the alert as new clusters of COVID-19 have been appearing in the province. There are clusters in various districts around Yogyakarta and in schools as well. There's a school cluster that led to a suspension of classroom learning in all schools in Sadayu district, Bantul Regency. And the Sultan said the school should remain closed until everybody undergoes 2 negative swabs before reopening. And he also specifically mentioned madrasa in Bantul, where a teacher insisted on teaching despite having tested positive for COVID, and he infected all of his students. Great. Really irresponsible on the teacher's part. And Jogja Social Service is reactivating dozens of isolation shelters to quarantine patients with mild symptoms and without symptoms. Those shelters were deactivated after cases declined significantly in October, and they're being opened up again. So that's not good news to clusters. We know those can happen. Is that going to affect how we deal with tourists coming in? I don't know. Right now, the results seem to be pretty good for other countries, and we'll talk about that in a minute. What about vaccines and vaccinations? Parents await jab rollout for children. Parents are happy that the government will begin administering COVID-19 vaccines to 26 million children aged 6 to 11 starting next year. The Food and Drug Monitoring Agency, BPOM, approved the CoronaVac vaccine produced by Chinese Sinovac for emergency use for children as young as 6. Children have been in school, well, varying times. It started in Jakarta back in August, and they started here just a few weeks ago. And, well, because this is a holiday, there's no school today again. The Indonesian Child Protection Commission, KPAI, said that COVID-19 vaccinations for children cannot wait, and it says parents should have their children vaccinated as soon as the vaccination drive starts. The KPAI commissioner said the government needs to accelerate the vaccine distribution for the new age group because children are in school and they need to be vaccinated in order to keep themselves and their parents and their teachers safe. However, not all parents are convinced that the vaccine is completely safe and effective because they don't have any access to clear information about possible side effects and the pros and cons of having the vaccine for pediatric use. And I've got questions as well. As one parent said about her 8-year-old son, I'm certainly worried about any side effects on my son's growth. I hope the government gives parents more information about that. And according to Health Ministry spokeswoman Siti Nadia Tarmizi, and we've talked about her before, parents are going to have to wait for the government to procure up to 28 million more doses of Sinovac vaccine that will be used for the new age group. The government is waiting for some 40 million doses by the end of the year that will be used for the second jab of vaccinations for adults. So we've got to get the adults done, second shot first, and then the kids come afterwards. She said she hopes that vaccination of younger children will start in January of the coming year, so January 2022. The BPOM also announced last week plans to authorize 2 other vaccines for minors that includes Sinopharm and Pfizer. According to Satriwan Salim from the Education and Teachers Association, P2G, he said that the authorization should have come sooner because children in this age group are already attending school without any access to vaccines. He said roughly 70% of children in the country, including elementary schools, have been hosting in-class learning now. He added he does not believe government should make vaccinations mandatory for children to attend in-class learning. He said ideally everyone needs to get vaccinated first, but considering distribution problems and vaccine shortages, I don't think Indonesia is ready for that. And what about opening up quarantine? Well, here's an article. Indonesia mulls vaccine lane to further bypass quarantine restrictions. So this is more on the VTL, and I talked about this before. So Indonesia is looking for new ways to revive the tourism sector. And so they're pushing for a travel lane, vaccine travel lane, VTL, with several neighboring countries that would allow further reductions in quarantine. At a regional summit meeting last week, Coordinating Economic Minister Arlanga Hartarto said 6 ASEAN countries were working together in sub-regional groups to set up a VTL in a bid to offset the economic slump that has resulted from plummeting tourism arrivals. And so who is this? Members of the Brunei, Indonesia, Malaysia, Philippines, East Asian Growth Area, BIMPEAGA. Okay, I love these. As well as the Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand Growth Triangle, IMT, along with Singapore, are currently trying to work out this policy. And according to the minister, the pandemic has slashed numbers, we all know that, and so there's a drop from 29.7 million in 2019 to 6.2 million for the 4 nations of BIMPEAGA, and the IMTGT saw a slump from 40 million in 2019 to 8.2 million in 2020. Pak Arlanga said that there is still hope for the region, and he cited Thailand's Phuket as a successful precedent for a quarantine policy. He said Thailand can be an example for Indonesia. But the decision of Indonesia, when they cut down the quarantine days from 5 to 3, has sparked some concern among the medical community, who are wary that rushing into reopening ahead of the holiday season spike in travel and amid reports of numerous infections in neighboring countries could be disastrous. Diki Budiman, I've mentioned him many times, the epidemiologist from Griffith University, said Indonesia should be looking into a more vaccine policy-based approach of reviving tourism as opposed to one that hinges on the length of quarantine. He said the government should consider other epidemiological indicators before taking on the travel corridor arrangements like positivity, virus reproduction rates, or welcoming tourists from ASEAN countries that have inoculated at least 70% of their population. He said when these criteria are met, there won't be any need for a quarantine. The problem, he said, is that the government has yet to make these criteria formal requirements, so they have no choice but to go with the quarantine option. How is this going to work? I don't know. We're going to have to wait and see. Some people feel it's too early. Some people say it's time. If you've been double vaccinated and you're test negative and you come from one of the countries that's been approved, that it should be time to come and do away with the 3-day quarantine. Is there going to be a difference between the 3-day and a 1-day like in Thailand? I don't know. What do you think? Make a comment down below. And if you have some hard data, that would be really good to see. And as I've mentioned many videos recently, everybody's watching Thailand and what's happened with Thailand after the first week. Over 20,000 tourists entered Thailand since November 1st, 15 test positive. So the Department of Disease Control reported on Sunday that since Thailand has reopened 17 tourist provinces to vaccinated foreign visitors, 20,092 tourists have entered the country. Tourists that enter the country under this program have to come from one of 63 countries that have a low level of COVID-19 infection. And they need to have the vaccine done at least 14 days before entering, as well as a negative PCR test taken no later than 72 hours before flying. That does not keep people from testing positive, however, when they get there. So far, 15 foreign visitors have tested positive for COVID on arrival, or 0.07% of all visitors. So, a very small number so far. So far, so good. Most of the tourists have entered in Bangkok, followed by Phuket, 6,722 people. 10 tested positive coming into Phuket. Into Bangkok, 5 out of 12,978 tested positive. Samui had 309 people, and Chiang Mai had 83 people, and those are probably the Koreans I talked about the other day. And where are the tourists coming from? Number 1, United States. That's interesting. 2,465, followed by Germany, the UK, Japan, South Korea, Russia, Switzerland, Sweden, France, and the UAE. So Europeans want to get out, Japanese, the South Koreans. US, I'm surprised at the big number from the US. But I think they prefer Thailand over Indonesia. Not sure why that is. If you have any ideas, leave a comment below. and more on what's happening around the region and VTL. And this time we're talking about Singapore. Singapore eases border measures for more Southeast Asian countries. New VTLs launched with Finland and Sweden. Passengers arriving from Indonesia, Thailand, Vietnam, and the Philippines are going to be among the countries that will have more relaxed border measures beginning November 11th, tomorrow. Travelers from these countries will be allowed to present a negative, professionally administered antigen rapid test taken within 2 days prior to departure for Singapore. And this is an alternative to the PCR test, which is currently required. And well, today's the last day it's going to be required. The government also announced that 23 countries previously considered to be highest risk, including Laos and India, are going to have relaxed border restrictions. Travelers from those countries will be allowed to serve a 10-day stay-at-home notice or at a hotel of their choice. They are currently required to quarantine in an SHN dedicated facility. And Singapore is going to be adding 3 new vaccinated travel lanes, and this time with Malaysia, Sweden, and Finland. And they're going to increase the daily quota of travelers to 6,000 over the current quota of 4,000. VTL travelers will be allowed to present the professionally administered negative rapid antigen test. Singapore's health minister said that despite the rising number of cases in Europe, infection rates there are not out of control and remain lower than Singapore's 46 cases out of every 100,000 people. He said Denmark and Germany seeing about 28 cases per 100,000 people, and in Spain the rate's below 5. And the transport minister said that Singapore's VTL experience so far has given it confidence to further extend the program, and that is good news. That's good news for Indonesia, who is, as I discussed before in a previous segment, working on getting VTLs with a number of countries in the region. The transport minister said that as of November 7th, close to 18,000 people have entered Singapore via the VTL scheme, and out of this, 17 have tested positive, about 1 in every 1,000. And this is similar to the numbers that we're seeing in Thailand. So good news on the VTLs. Are we going to have VTLs soon with other countries in the region? I hope so. And so what's going on around Bali? Well, nightclubs and karaoke places are being chased by the police. This is what they're looking for. Okay, chased is not a good translation there. Being raided by the police. So the Denpasar Bali police organized raids on a number of nightclubs in Denpasar and Badung. That activity was held this past weekend, Saturday and Sunday. Visitors and employees were examined. This was a joint drug raid. They're looking for drugs. And it involved 60 personnel. And they hit a number of nightclubs and karaoke places, including the Platinum Discotheque, the Boshi, the Gian Legian, and La Favela. And according to the head of public relations for the Balinese police, this entertainment venue is a place that's currently confirmed to be crowded by visitors, and so that's why they went there. They were suspicious of what was going on. The raid specifically targeted drug abuse and trafficking. Visitors and employees were examined one by one. Their bags and belongings also were examined, but no drugs were found. According to Siamsa, in addition, our personnel always remind visitors and nightclub employees to obey health procedures. Apply 3M, wear a mask, keep your distance, and wash your hands. Of course, this is always how press conferences end. Do people do that? Sometimes, sometimes not. The mask wearing, much more likely than the rest. So we've got the Peduli Lindungi app, which is supposed to be installed all over supermarkets, tourist attractions, the traditional markets. Here in Bulang, in Singaraja, it's not installed here at the market. In fact, there's not even anybody checking anymore when people go into the market. I asked my wife today, she said, oh, they took down the checkpoint. People just come and go. Who's checking on masks and social distancing? Nobody. Well, here's a story. Not yet effective. Many market visitors ignore the PeduliProtect application. So even though a number of points at the entrance to the Klungkung public market have the PLQR code installed, it's not being used. According to the story, A few of the market visitors who are still ignorant are free to go in and out without scanning the QR code. In addition to the entrance, the QR code is also affixed to the wall. So QR codes are very strategically placed and highly visible, but the awareness of visitors to scan the QR code is low or not effective. And why aren't they told to scan like I was in the video, if you saw the video when I was at the museum with Zoe? Well, because there's no officers on duty there apparently. According to market manager, of course in the future we as market managers will continue to evaluate because nobody is doing anything. There are a limited number of market officers there making the monitoring and the implementation of the QR code not able to be carried out optimally. According to Ikomang Subianta, the number of visits to the Galungan market has decreased significantly since the beginning of COVID-19. But he said, we continue to remind all visitors who come to the market to wear masks, and we ask them to keep their distance when shopping and not to crowd. But apparently not to scan either. And so we've got the traditional market in Galungan, not using the QR code there. Here we don't even have it installed apparently, and so next time I'm down there I'm going to go and check because, well, my wife told me, and well, I take my wife's word for it. She said I just walk in and that's it. This is something the government's been stressing many times: discipline, self-discipline, and I've been talking about if you're going to have rules you need to implement them. And today is Galungan. This is the beginning of the Galungan Kuningan ceremonial period. And as usual, prices go up during this period. So this story, Galungan meat and commodity prices start to soar. The prices of commodity or basic necessities in Badung Regency is starting to creep up. The soaring price was triggered by market demand ahead of the celebration of Galungan and Kuningan. Since Monday, the price of basic necessities has increased. Pork, for example, has gone from 85,000 per kilo to 90,000 per kilo. Chicken from 38,000 to 39,000. Pepper from 19,000 to 21,000. Shallots from 20,000 to 21,000. Not a huge amount, but it adds up, especially if you're planning on feeding lots of people, which, well, a lot of people get fed during this period. The head of the Badung Regional Secretariat for the Economy said that, yes, there is a spike, but he said it's not due to a scarcity of goods, it's just the normal increase at this time of the year due to market demand. He noted, in order to reduce price spikes, the Badung Region government has organized a low-cost market. And there was a market at the Girinatha Cultural Center last Friday, and the Agricultural Service also held the Badung Farmers Promo in order to help stabilize prices. So if you're shopping now, you may notice that things are a little more expensive than usual. But as I said, that happens all the time around the holiday season. And here's an interesting one, some more Bali news. Bali beach clubs made scapegoat as an Indonesian official highlights health protocol violations. This is from Coconuts, and Coconuts sometimes has, well, kind of clickbait titles. The Coordinating Maritime Affairs and Investment Minister Pak Luhut said that an official team deployed to observe pandemic curbs found that number of violations in this field, especially in restaurants and beach clubs located in Bali. And the Coconuts article acts like the clubs are being picked on. Anybody that's watched social media, especially YouTube, over the last 6 months, has seen these violations going on all the time. It's not any big news, it's just the minister decided to mention it today. Pak Luhut said beach clubs and bars are operating without limiting capacity, there is no physical distancing, and no enforcement from management to implement health protocols during its operational hours. There is no obligation for guests to scan the QR code, so the numbers don't represent the real conditions. Well, okay, as I said, this is not a surprise. And is this picking on the beach clubs? It's been going on a long time. I was wondering if they were ever going to get around to this. And yes, as you saw in a previous segment, clubs frequented by Indonesians are also subject to raids. Well, they didn't raid the beach clubs, but the raids, but that was for drugs. But they also looking at health protocols as well. Pak Luhut added that Bars and clubs are avoiding the sanctions by prohibiting patrons from posting on social media, despite violating health protocols during the pandemic. And if you've watched, as I said, some of these YouTube videos, you know that some of the clubs take your phone when you come in so that you can't video anything. And this is all publicly, easily available on YouTube. If you watch any of the frequent YouTubers who travel around Bali, usually in the south, doing videos, updates on what's happening, like the monkeys and Bobo and a number of Indonesian vloggers. And the Coconuts article took offense at Pak Luhut specifically mentioning the beach clubs, because they said, well, there's violations going on at weddings, receptions, offices, and retail businesses, all of which are being reported in the press and commented on by government officials if you read Indonesian media. If you don't read Indonesian, you can easily Google Translate this if you want to find these. Well, you have to kind of look for the stories. Sometimes the Indonesian websites, press websites, are full of ads, and it's a little difficult to navigate through some of them. Although Coconuts did say, to be fair, Luhut, though, pointed out some restaurants and cafes in Bandung, West Java have been violating protocol specifically, but Minister did not offer any specifics. Okay, there are lots of specifics going on about Indonesians violating the protocols. I just don't mention most of these because, well, they're relatively insignificant. They pop into one bar or two bars and they catch somebody. I do when it's up here in Buluang because, well, it's local news for me. But a lot of raids in Denpasar. But admittedly, it's always fun for government ministers to point out what bad things we're doing. And one final segment before I get to the wrap up, and this is something near and dear to my heart about electric vehicles. And so let's take a look at that. And here's an article that, well, affects me because my son-in-law and my son are involved in the electric motorcycle business. Gojek, Grab, Bluebird lead way for EV adoption in Indonesia. So private sector transportation companies have announced plans to put on the road thousands of electric vehicles, known as EV usually, which could propel EV adoption in Indonesia by creating a demand for a network of charging stations. So what is one of the problems of having an electric motorcycle now? One is service. My son services motorcycles and he's running all over Bali, and so are other guys working in his company. And so there's a need for service in various places. We should have a shop here in Singaraja. Hello. And we need the charging stations. Without the charging stations, we're not going to get very far on selling electric motorcycles or electric cars. Management consulting firm McKinsey & Company senior expert Raul Gupta said ride-hailing, taxi, and fleet services touch two of the three factors that would boost EV adoption in Indonesia, namely higher consumer awareness and demand, as well as decline in total cost of ownership, TCO. Pak Gupta said, first, they account for a significant number of vehicles running on the road, and there's a pull from consumers to adopt EV. And secondly, given the high average daily distance that ride-hailing and taxi drivers run, it helps improve TCO competitiveness with internal combustion engines, ICE vehicles, thus supporting the business case. Gupta added that if companies collect the data on their drivers' journeys, that would make it easier for charging operators to decide on the location of fast charging or battery swap stations. Taxi provider Bluebird and ride-hailing companies Gojek and Grab have all taken steps to roll out EV with trial runs as well as partnerships with EV manufacturers to provide electric motorbikes and cars for their drivers. And Gojek has announced a partnership with Taiwan-based EV manufacturing Gogoro for a trial involving 250 electric two-wheelers and battery swap services from Gogoro at 4 gas stations in Jakarta, not here in Bali. Through the partnership, which marks the second EV trial, Gojek plans to deploy 5,000 electric motorcycles, starting with 500 vehicles in South Jakarta. And the ride-hailing company vowed to make its entire fleet electric and become carbon neutral by 2030. And Singapore-based Grab announced a net zero emissions commitment as well, and recently placed an order for 6,000 electric motorbikes from local manufacturing VR Motor Indonesia. The company plans to distribute the vehicles to drivers throughout Indonesia by the end of the year. And Grab also launched an electric taxi service, Grab Car Electric, in 2019. Okay, we have none of this stuff here. The Indonesian government has proclaimed a target to have 400,000 electric four-wheelers and 1.76 electric motorcycles on the road by 2025. However, currently there's only 150 electric four-wheelers, 5,538 two-wheelers, and 29 three-wheelers on the road as of September, according to the Ministry Maritime Industry, Transportation and Defense Equipment Director, Sunny Salaksono. And PLN, state-owned electric company that we're all dependent on, said that 31,000 charging stations would be needed by 2030, requiring an investment of $3.8 billion US dollars, or 54.6 trillion rupiah. The PLN Technology Vice President said the utility company has 50 general-purpose electric charging stations in operation across 18 cities in Indonesia and plans to set up 67 more by the end of the year. And PLN expects that there will be a lot of interest from private companies in building charging stations. But because the fleet right now is so small, people are waiting for the right moment. According to Pagzainal, aside from private ownership, we expect EVs to come from taxi firms, ride-hailing companies, government officials' cars will also be replaced with electric ones starting next year. Okay, it's time for a wrap it, and I'm testing the recording conditions out here. There is a breeze, and well, there's birds all over here. And I was wearing my headphones yesterday listening to sound, and I could hear the birds clearly wearing headphones. I don't hear it when I just play it back on my computer speakers. So, I don't know, the bird, there are a lot of birds that we have here because we've got the garden on the roof, and I'm going to do a video on that one whenever my wife is ready to do that. And so we have birds everywhere here. So what do we got? We've got good news on the numbers, the clarification on the quarantine, so it is 2 nights and 3 days, not 3 nights and 4 days. That's good news. The numbers are looking good. Are we getting any visitors in internationally, direct into Bali? No, still no planes scheduled as far as I know. No hotel rooms booked as far as I know. You would think that if there were, this would be big press, but it doesn't look like it. The VTLs look really positive for Singapore, and Indonesia is, as several segments talked about, Indonesia is in negotiations to open up VTLs with our neighbors in Southeast Asia. Early reports from Thailand are positive. Very few cases out of the first 20,000 visitors. Was it 15? So the VTLs are a positive sign. We do have to remain cautious. That segment on the PTL being used in the markets, you know, if you've been here at all, you know what markets are like here, traditional markets. They are packed. People are back to back, arm to arm, shoulder to shoulder. And if they're not wearing masks, if they haven't gone through the vaccination process, that's problematic. That's really problematic. And so this is one of the things that the government talks about when they say people need to be disciplined, self-disciplined. They need to follow the program because we can't get lax. The numbers are good. We want to open up. But if people are lax, we're just waiting for an explosion to happen. Good news about the kids being vaccinated early next year if we get enough vaccine. And we still have a long way to go with the rest of the country. We want to get the rest of the country up until at least 70%. And I don't know why I'm using that 70% number, but everybody is using it, so I'm going to use it today too. And there's some stories about Merck, and I didn't get to that, and I'll get to that on Sunday. I have a video that I'm going to be uploading either later today or tomorrow. It's about a family trip to Arsani. It's very short, about 9 minutes, I think, with kind of a lengthy introduction by me about what Arsani is and taking a break there. If you're interested in that, please take a look at that. So that's about it. Still feeling positive, even though it's going to rain soon. And thanks for viewing. Wherever you are, stay safe. Be kind to someone today. Follow the protocols. If you're here, take care, enjoy the weather, And if you want to come into Bali, you can still come in on the B211A with the business and fly through Jakarta. If you're waiting for a direct flight into Denpasar, well, good luck. I hope that happens soon. If you found this useful, please give it a thumbs up. And if you haven't subscribed, please consider subscribing. I will see you again on Sunday. Take care and stay safe.